players 6-0 so far. And I believe that they are already in day 2 with these records.
Yeah, a little bit of a short turnout here in Worcester, but that is fairly common on these Week 1 standard opens just because not a lot of people have access to the cards yet.
Yeah, it can be tough to find a deck, but Paul Muller has not only found a deck, he's styling. He's shocking for a breeding pool for a Beta Llanowar Elves.
That is a nice elf.
Hinterland Harbor is a second land into Risen Reef. He'll get a trigger off of that.
Yeah, and even though Llanowar Elves is not an elemental, you're seeing exactly why it's in the deck here. Turn 2 Risen Reef is a big game.
Yeah, got a forest as well. Montefusco starts with the Spectral Sailor, flashed it in on Muller's turn. We'll see what he can do on turn 2. He's got a Curious Obsession. He'll suit up the Sailor with that. 2 points coming across. Muller to 16.
Yeah, it's going to be a matchup where it's kind of like 2 decks passing in the night, and it's going to be basically on Anthony Montefusco to close the door before stuff like Risen Reef really gets going. With Paul Muller casting it on turn 2, though, I think this might actually be his game to lose.
And also on turn 2, adds a Fairy Miscreant, perhaps my favorite all-time limited draft around card.
Yeah, and it's a card that has seen a reasonable amount of play in Pauper, actually. One of the few one-drop flyers that, combines well with stuff like Delver of Secrets, and if you draw in multiples, you draw a card.
Plays really well when your deck's full of Ponders, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, for sure.
Go back to Muller. He's got a pair of Leafkin Druids, a pair of Risen Reef triggers. Those are both going to be cards going to hand. And no land drop, just going to pass.
Yeah, doesn't want to trade Risen Reef for Fair Miscreant, so no attack, but next turn has access to 8 mana on the battlefield.
Very curious position for Montefusco. Double Obsession, 1 on the Miscreant, the second one on the Spectral Sailor. He's 5 coming across in the air and 3 cards to be drawn. Muller to 11.
Yeah, this is a nice start from Anthony, and if he can protect himself with a Spell Pierce or dive down to make sure that his creatures don't die to one of those lava coils or something like that, he's got a reasonable amount of power coming through the air, and I don't think Paul can close the game in 2 turns, and that's basically what we're looking at here.
Yeah, definitely going to be difficult, and Montefusco still has a land drop for this turn, and I've spotted at least 3 lands in the hand, so hopefully he has some spells to go with them, but it won't take long to gas back up with this setup.
Yeah, I mean, drawing 3 extra cards a turn. I believe he has another Fairy Miscreant too, so he's going to draw another card.
Yeah, Glacial Fortress is the land, Fairy Miscreant is the play. He'll draw, and we'll go to Muller. He's got to do something about this battlefield.
I don't think he can. I think that's kind of the problem. He has... I
think one of the best things he can do is just cast Cavalier of Thorns and hope that sticks around.
I mean, that's certainly fair. He's currently lacking in red mana, but he's got a second Risen Reef here and access to a lot of green.
Right, Reef draws the first card. The second one is a Breeding Pool that will enter the battlefield tapped. Here's a tap of 5 mana off the Druids and the Llanowar Elves. Could be a Cavalier.
Yeah, and Cavalier having reach is a pretty big deal.
So that is Cavalier of Thorns. So it has its own Enter the Battlefield trigger as well as triggering both of the Risen Reefs because it is an elemental. So we'll get 2 looks, but first he's going to resolve the Cavalier. There's a land there. A Forest would enter the battlefield. The other 4 cards going to the graveyard. 2 looks with the Reef. First one is a land. It's like a Temple entering tapped.
Temple of Mystery actually gets to Scribe before resolving the second Risen Reef trigger, which is pretty sweet. Because if it's a really good card, he can keep it. If it's a bad spell, bottom it. And if he needs more mana, like he's just looking for a red source to play those lava coils. And he found it.
Yeah, so there was a card going to the bottom. He'll shock for a Steam. No, play a Steam Vents tapped, rather. Llanowar Elf will be cast. And we'll go to Montefusco. So does this deck play much in the way of interaction? Do we have any unsummons? Looks like we just have
Absolutely
creatures
not.
And protection spells.
Dungeon Geist is it. You didn't let me finish. I was going to say Dungeon Geist is the only thing.
Dungeon Geist, tap down. Your Crusader, here comes 6 damage in the air.
Let's draw 3 more cards.
Not a bad setup here for Montefusco. And that's just another big flyer, too. Not only does it answer the Cavalier of Thorns, but now Muller's at 5. This is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and even if he's able to knock off the Dungeon Geist here, his creature's not going to untap until the next time it could potentially untap. So Muller here going to need a string of stuff like Omnath, Locus of the Royal, Lava Coil. He's going to need to take care of a lot of flyers here.
Drew for turn. Surveying the board here, see exactly what he can do. Just 1 red mana hanging out in the potentials here.
Now, he does have Hydroid Krasis in his deck as well, so he does have some flying blockers. He has 4 copies of Cavalier of Thorns, so he has some ways to block these creatures. He just doesn't have a lot in the way of actually killing them. Mass Manipulation is in his deck in a small number. He could find one of those potentially, and that would obviously swing the game heavily in his favor thanks to all that mana from those creatures.
Yeah, those Leaf Crown Druids, that's no joke with Mass Manipulation. If you drew that could be huge. And he's not conceding, so you got to figure he has something pretty good.
I think he's going to Hydroid Krasis for 6, and then try to find something to cast for 5, like another Cavalier of Thorns, or Lava Coil, or what have you. Or he's just playing a Cavalier with 1 floating. Seems odd. So Nissa, okay.
So he's using his non-forest mana sources, has 1 floating because of the Druids, to cast Nissa, who shakes the world.
He could just untap an elf, I guess, but you know, I'm just gonna let it lie.
We'll see what the follow-up will be from there. Even more mana at his disposal.
And if he already had a Hydroid Krasis, this would be just a bonkers amount here. Can still untap one of those forests, generating an extra mana there.
Yeah, so he taps Breeding Pool for blue and green, untaps that, makes that one a 3/3. Still has 1 untapped Leaf Crown Druid, now 3 mana floating in the pool, 2 green, 1 blue. Shocks for a Steam Vents, a miscut Steam Vents.
I believe that's a full miscut Steam Vents. That is nice.
Yeah.
Paul Muller showing off a bit with his fancy cards here.
Shock into 3, though. That's less nice.
Yeah, well. I may have
Chandra Awakened
spoken
Inferno?
too soon. There's, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Paul Muller's handwriting is quite bad.
But dealing 3 damage to all non-elemental creatures is quite good.
It's very good.
That's a Plague Wind. Had to take care of a couple of his own Land War Elves. That's no big deal.
Yeah, 1 copy of Chandra Awakened Inferno, just an absurd magic card. 6 mana is a lot, even in Standard, but those abilities are just all nuts.
Still a lot of mana left over on top of starting with just 2 really powerful Planeswalkers here. And how about a 3rd powerful Planeswalker? Here's Tamiyo.
Now, Tamiyo here can get back the Risen Reef that was put there by the Cavalier of Thorns. Can't quite cast it. Not sure if they're... Oh, can't cast it off the...
yeah, you can use the Breeding Pool.
The Breeding Pool that got untapped, yes.
It's looking at a plus on the Tamiyo. Find out what he names, what he can hit. Cavalier of Thorns was named. 4 cards go to the graveyard. Missed on a Hydroid Krasis, but... he seems to be doing pretty well now, as we see an attack for 5 coming across. Montiefusco to 15. All right, so now Muller went from being pretty far behind facing down lethal to facing down Montiefusco on no non-land permanents. And the Azorius Spirits deck does a lot worse of a job of playing from behind. He'll play an island. What can he do with 5 mana?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen decks like Mono Blue and even like Delver back in the day where, they were able to establish a foothold early and kind of ride that to victory. But if the opponent played something like Supreme Verdict and they couldn't counter it, oftentimes that would just be the nail in the coffin.
Notably, Chandra Awakened Inferno just already is at the ready with another deal 3 damage to all non-elementals. So most of the stuff that Montiefusco can do is just answered by that. We see the turn is Remorseful Cleric plus Fairy Miscreant. We go back to Muller. Does have to be a little bit careful at 3 life.
Yeah, and, Montiefusco actually has a reasonable number of cards in his deck with the Flash mechanic, too. So Paul Muller's not quite out of the woods yet, but he is looking pretty good. I think you'll probably see a minus on the Chandra Awakened Inferno. Probably even leave back the Cavalier of Thorns that's on the battlefield unless he has a backup in hand. You also have to know that Paul Muller actually probably doesn't know all the stuff that's in Anthony's deck. So he doesn't really know exactly what to play around. You know, he sees Remorseful Cleric, he sees Fairy Miscreant, and he's thinking, well, you know, this guy could have anything.
Yeah, we've seen a few different ways to build these Spectral Sailor decks, these Spirit decks, these Flyers decks, be it Mono Blue, Azorius. Paul thought about using the Chandra just to clear out the battlefield first, but he's going to actually start by plussing the Nissa, making a forest into a 3/3, floating 2 green mana first.
Well, what he can do if he wants is minus the Chandra, and then just get it back with Tamiyo and cast it again.
Woof.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
An embarrassment of riches
But
for
I
Paul
feel like
Muller.
this is like a Hydro Crisis for like 100, so, you know.
That's not bad either.
I don't know how Montiefusco actually beats this one.
Muller setting up a lot of mana here. I think this is 12 plus the 2 floating for this Hydroid Crisis.
Maths.
Yep, X equals 12. Goes to 9 and draws 6 cards.
Not a bad one.
Still has untapped Breeding Pool and Forest, which is good for 4 mana.
Hilariously choosing to attack for 6 here instead of just, you know, gaining 2 more life and drawing 2 more cards because embarrassment of riches.
Hey, got to end the game at some point, right?
True, true.
The 12-12 Crisis will not have much difficulty doing that as well. Lining up an attack with those 2 animated lands. May as well send in the rest of the Knuckleheads, the 2 Risen Reefs, thinking about turning sideways as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, you don't really care that much about accruing value anymore with these Risen Reefs. The real question is whether or not to attack with the Cavalier of Thorns, just because the reach gives you just a solid amount of protection with the Flying Body on the Hydroid Crisis, but
Yeah, Muller plays it safe with the Cavalier, so the 2 3/3 lands and the 2 1/1 Risen Reefs, they'll be attacking. That's all going to connect. Montefusco down to 7. Muller will shock for a Stomping Ground to 7 himself. More spells, huh?
I mean, you can still spend 6 mana to cast spells off these lands in that Stomping Ground. His hand is stacked from the Hydroid Crisis. He has a Tamiyo minus he can still do. I would just blow him up. Just get him out. But a -1 on the Remorseful Cleric's not that bad either.
Yeah, so he pointed Chandra at the Cleric, dive down, will defend.
I wouldn't even mind, yeah, minus the Tamiyo, get back another Hydroid Crisis, force him to choose between that or using the Remorseful Cleric.
He's going to cast Omnath.
That's a good one, too.
Ample elementals to take down the Fairy Miscreant, and that's going to do it. Now Montefusco has seen enough.
That was the one that closed it. That one.
Everyone has their limits.
Well, now if you're playing Final Fantasy VII, them limits break.
I got nothing for that.
Yeah, you should see the look on Ryan's face. It is, he's not having it.
I just don't even know where to start.
You know.
Let's start by talking about some sideboards.
All right, well, Anthony's going to be on the play, so let's start with them.
All right. Zorius Spirits, down a game, playing against Teamer Elementals. Sideboard, he has 2 copies of Devout Decree. That's the white color hoster from Core Set 2020. 3 Lantern of Sanctity. I wasn't sure if we were going to see this one in Standard. It has showed up in his sideboard. 2 copies of Sleep, 3 Cerulean Drake, so really heavy on Core Set 2020. 2 Tail's End, and 3 Narset's Reversals. Yeah,
so this sideboard is pretty stock for just like handling a lot of these very specific threats that people can throw at you. You know, Leyline of Sanctity is a card that I didn't think would see that much play in Standard. It's interesting that Montefusco has actually gone here with it. You know, it's not really for this matchup, but it is something interesting to think about. Now, as far as like something like Tail's End is concerned, it does counter legendary effects, counters Planeswalkers, but it also can counter the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers already on the battlefield. I'm not sure how good that's going to be here, but he's probably going to bring it in just because it works well against those Planeswalkers as well as the Omnath. Cerulean Drake, not really for this matchup. Sleep might actually be pretty sweet, just shutting down the mana generation from those large creatures, as well as tapping down the flyers and the reach stuff. But not a whole lot actually for him here.
All right, we'll see what Paul Muller can do to more solidly solidify his advantage. We have 3 Veil of Summer, 3 Negate, 2 more Lava Coil to complement the 2 in the main deck, 2 Cerulean Drake, 2 copies of Ether Gust, a Fry, an Entrancing Melody, and a second copy of Chandra Awakened Inferno.
Well, we saw how good Chandra Awakened Inferno was in Game 1, so we're definitely bringing that one in. I like Entrancing Melody. It's a cheap way to steal a creature. A lot of one mana cost creatures from Montiefusco's side of things. The Fry obviously comes in. It kills every creature in the deck for 2 mana and can't be countered. If there's some random planeswalker like a, was it Min Yanglang?
Mu Yanling.
Mu Yanling.
Sky Dancer.
Yeah, my bad on that one. I actually played a lot with it on Versus Live on Thursday, and I said the name right a bunch. But my bad.
Someday you'll say it right again.
And then I would bring in the Lava Coils. Maybe the Veil of Summer. The Veil of Summer seems like it should be a slam dunk, but Anthony doesn't actually have a ton of actual counter spells in his deck. He's just a bunch of flying creatures and some spell pierces and dive downs. So most of the time the Veil of Summer's not going to do anything, but Paul might not know that. He might just expect Montiefusco to just have like wizards with Wizard's Retort and stuff like that. So I'm actually curious to see how Paul sideboards, because with elementals you need to keep a reasonable number of like actual creatures in your deck, and the deck can't really afford to side out a bunch of those planeswalkers, because then you're just all air with your mana creatures and stuff. So I'm very interested to see how Paul does sideboard here.
Yeah, you got to maintain your synergies and your heavy hitters at least to some extent.
Right.
If you're interested in checking out some more Magic content, real easy in subscribing to the Star City Games newsletter, your source for Magic the Gathering news. You get highlights from some of our best articles over at StarCityGames.com. Upcoming SCG tour dates and locations, I can tell you the next 2 because we're on the next 2 shows. Going to be in Philly next weekend.
I couldn't tell you the next 2, and I'm on the next 2 shows.
Okay, I can tell you the next 2. Todd and I will both be there. Hopefully he finds his way.
I learn on Tuesday where I'm going on Friday, okay? I get an email from Chris McCurry over Star City Games, and he's just like, here's your travel package. You're getting on the van. And,
yeah,
you sit there.
Quick shout out to one of the unsung heroes of the SCG Tour.
Absolutely.
Without Christopher McCurry, this whole operation falls apart.
Absolutely.
Todd wouldn't get here.
I wouldn't even know that there was an event that week.
The newsletter's good, too. It's not as good as Chris McCurry, but it's free.
It is free, and you can sign up today. If you go to go.starcitygames.com/newsletter, is that it?
Yeah.
All right, got it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Looks like Muller here is taking a Muller again.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Call him London Paul.
Yeah, because he likes to Muller again. Oh, mate, take an air Mulligan. That's not right.
Gonna take a look at a 7 and put 1 on the bottom, assuming he keeps. Huge fan of this update. Could not be happier to be London Mulliganing. You're old. You hate change.
I don't even hate change. I like good change. I don't know if this is a good change.
Well, you'll find out. It is.
I mean, that's fair.
You know what? I think is less good than the London Mulligan. How do you feel about
modern? Dark format.
How do you feel about basic planes in Montiefusco's deck?
Is there one?
There's 5 of them. We see a lot of blue spells here.
Well,
starts with the Fairy Miscreant. Muller starts with the Temple of Epiphany.
I would personally rather those planes just be Temple of Temple of Enlightenment.
It's not legal. That's the problem.
You didn't let me finish.
Exactly.
Of course it's not legal. Only the enemy ones are legal.
Yes.
So there's not really a whole lot of options for lands that come into the battlefield untapped. So it's got to be planes or nothing. And he chose planes. But he does have a ton of 1-mana blue cards.
Leafkin Druid on turn 2 for Paul. Montiefusco's second land was that plane, so we stopped at second Fairy Miscreant. I think we can see a handful of blue cards here. There's a Curious Obsession on 1 Miscreant and an attack for 3. Muller to 16. Montiefusco draws a card.
maybe because Montiefusco has so many planes in his deck, maybe those dive downs actually should be God's willing.
Yeah, there's an argument to that. Once you have a diversity in mana generation, you want to have a diversity in colored spells like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have your threats cost blue and some of your protection cost white, so you get to use basically all of your mana each turn. You know, here, if Paul Muller was playing a deck with a good bit of removal, there's a chance that, you know, Montiefusco just gets clapped by some removal spell because he didn't have a way to protect. So all he had open was white.
Yeah, on the Muller's turn 3, Lava Coil pointed at Fairy Miscreant. Dive down will protect. That works. Second Druid for Muller. He'll pass.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was expecting to happen in game 1. Muller just had that Chandra, just Awakened Inferno, just coming alive on like turn 5 or 6 against Anthony, and you know you can't really stop it. It can't be countered. You can try to protect your creature with a dive down or something, but it's just bad news bears.
Miscreants come across again. Muller to 13. Montiefusco draws another extra card. Hoping to dodge a big Chandra in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note Montiefusco actually doesn't have Ether Gust in his sideboard, doesn't have any actual protection from that big Chandra. And here, Muller's shocking. What is it?
Shocks to 11. There is Chandra Awakened Inferno. -3 right away. Are those creatures elementals? No, they're not. Dive down would still save them, but there is no dive down. The Miscreants are dead.
Now, what we do have is a creature with flash, so we get to untap with some pressure on the battlefield and hopefully play something big here.
A Spectral Sailor shows up. Looks like multiple Spell Pierce in Montiefusco's hand.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate for Montiefusco because Chandra, of course, cannot be countered. Love to play Magic. Can't be countered.
Supreme Phantom.
You remember Carnage Tyrant?
I do.
Yeah. That card's stupid.
It's a 7/6.
And it can't be countered.
Correct. All right, Montiefusco shocks for Hollowed Fountain. He's at 18. The Sailor knocked Chandra to 1, and now we go back to Muller. So he does not have access immediately to -3 the Chandra again.
That is correct. He's going to be looking for another type of interaction here, whether it's coil or what have you. You know, if all he does is tick the Chandra up to 3, he's going to be in some trouble here.
Well, there's a coil targeting Supreme Phantom.
Yeah, double Spell Pierce doesn't do it here either because those elementals from Muller's side can pay.
Yeah, that resolves. Tap of 4. And it's Omnath.
Woof.
Can't Spell Pierce that one. There goes the Spectral Sailor. Chandra to 3, an emblem on Montiefusco's face.
Man, if I win an Invitational sometime soon, I'm going to be a Chandra emblem. Or what if I'm just the emblem? Because there's never like 2 emblems in play at once, right? But if there are, you know, maybe I'll have 2 pictures, one with me like, you know, putting the hands to the side like wah wah.
I like the idea of it being you, and it's supposed to be for every emblem, so you're like reading a rule book or something.
Yeah.
Or like consulting some oracle
I like
text.
that. I like that.
Yeah.
And the emblem just says, use this in place of every emblem ever because there's only one or the game ends.
Here's another new card for Montiefusco, Hanged Executioner.
Now, I do like this card a lot. Hanged Executioner, I think, might end up seeing some play in Modern as just a way to generate multiple spirits for all those spirit lords that exist in the format. The activated ability comes up a little more often than you think. But it is rather expensive. But just, you know, it's kind of like a Midnight Haunting that has an extra ability kind of tacked onto it.
So it showed up with a spirit. Later it could exile a creature, but Chandra just took it down, and Paul Muller very quickly 2-0 in this matchup.
Yeah, that matchup was, I mean, the game 1 I thought was like pretty lucky for Muller to hit that 1-0